All right, are we good to go?
I could let you know in just a
Oh,
moment,
sure.
I
Sorry.
think. Sorry. No worries. Where? Oh, this is us. This is definitely, yeah, we're live. We're good.
Great.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for being here. We'll call to order at 12:05. I'd like to begin with a land acknowledgement to acknowledge with respect that we're on the Robinson Huron Treaty Territory, and that the land on which we're gathered is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and known as Bao'teng. Bao'teng is the home of Garden River First Nation, Batchewana First Nation, and the historic Sault Ste. Marie Métis Council. Our first item on the agenda is the adoption of minutes from the previous meeting. Do I have a mover for the minutes? Moved by Brenna, seconded by Nyla. Great. Thank you both very much. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand or otherwise signal your consent, and the motion carries. Next item we have is a declaration of any pecuniary interest. We haven't received any in advance of the meeting. I don't know if there's any that are relevant for declaration today. Not seeing any, so we'll move on to item 4, adoption of the agenda. Could I have a mover for the agenda? Moved by Brenna, seconded by Nyla. Thank you both very much. Just a heads up to Luis and Yasmina, I wanted to let you know that my captions are covering your boxes. So if you raise your hand and I don't call on you, I'm not trying to ignore you. I'm just that's on me to figure out how to rearrange that. Oh, I can see the little thumbs up, so that works. Great. Okay. Any discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor, please raise your hands. And the motion carries. Next item we have is business arising. Item 5.1 is ACAP funding during intakes. I'll defer to Alicia for more information on this item.
Great. So this is something that we were discussing at, so this is more of a subcommittee update, but it's here as new business because, well, I think some discussion here is warranted as well. During our subcommittee meeting, the ACAP review process subcommittee that we had back last month, there was some healthy discussion about how we would move forward. And one of the pieces that was brought to our attention was again, the discrepancy of funds between the first intake and the second, where the first is more heavily weighted. And so it was the recommendation of the subcommittee that we bring it here to discuss if we should make a recommendation to council that these two intakes be then properly or funded at approximately half, 50% each, as opposed to the 70-30-ish model that we're using right now. Brenna, did I capture that? Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of what we were looking at, because we were kind of looking at what we're able to do and the work that we're putting in as a committee, and how limited we are in that second half. And if we were unable to get an increase in funds, at least the 50-50 would give us a more reasonable spread across the applications that we're getting.
Thank you both very much for the background. Open for discussion. Any comments? Donna.
What's the anticipation of getting an increase in funds? I noticed in the corporate strategic plan summary that there was, now I haven't read it for a few weeks, but, and I don't know if I have a copy handy, but anyways, somewhere in that, in the highlights, there is a sentence that I have to say I was so thrilled to see, that said something about increasing art funding for the arts. Never seen that before in something like that. And clearly the leadership at City Hall and council are finding that what would appear to me on their own more important. And that's great. So what's the anticipation there, or what's the process, or is a request being made? Is that going to be in supplementary, or is it, what's happening there?
Thanks,
I
Donna.
hate to defer to Virginia to speak to this, but if you could.
I can jump in. So we did put in a request again for $160,000. So that is going through the budget process. It'll be discussed as an operating increase because we're looking for that funding to be added in year over year. So just not one-time funding, but ongoing funding.
Thanks, Virginia. And I have a follow-up if nobody minds me jumping the queue on the speakers list, but I'm curious, is there anything that we as committee members can do to help make the case?
I think, you know, to Donna's point, it is great to see that it's actually incorporated and captured in the plan. Part of the mission is to provide municipal services that support development, enhance quality of life, and promote cultural vitality. So that's right in the mission up front, which is great to see. Again, you know, in the past, you know, the councillors are able to advocate. Usually the councillor on the committee is able to help advocate for the funding increases as well. But it is nice to see that there's that value placed on it and then it's being incorporated into the plan.
Larry? Or sorry, before I go to you, Larry, I just wanted to see if Donna had any response.
No, I'm okay. I just want to try and find, I'm trying to find the sentence. Did you just read the sentence that's in the summary report, Virginia? Because I thought it said something even more exciting than what, where did I see? Oh, enhance funding support for cultural initiatives.
Yeah, on page 9.
It's on, yeah, I found it. I found it. Okay. So
Yeah,
that really struck me as and if that's a focus area, then that is, you know, that's very important that that's listed there as a focus area. So no, that's good. I just, and so if we feel positive, there's no guarantees, but if we feel positive, there we go. Thank you. If we feel positive that, you know, that the request that you've put forward, which would generate an additional, I'm sorry, what is that? How much more is that than what we have now?
We requested an additional 160,000.
Oh, additional 160,000. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
That brings us up to the recommendation that was in the cultural plan. So yeah,
Which
trying
is the
to hit that value.
That's
Nice.
the $5 a person.
$5 per, yeah.
Okay, so then the only other comment I would have is if we're feeling positive about that and that there would be hopefully all of it, perhaps I'll just say all of it. You know, does that change the thinking at all? That's all.
Thank you.
Behind the thing we're discussing.
Thank you, Donna. First I have Larry, then Brenna. Larry.
Yeah, I think 50-50, even if we get a further $160,000, 50%, you know, for the first set of applications and another 50 for the second is the most appropriate, because it catches people when they're budgeting at different times of the year. For example, in performing arts, their year is really from September to June. And so they're budgeting, you know, at different times from people who are doing other things. Secondly, that is exciting to think they might consider giving another $160,000. I think we should try to link it to something, to what the city council has already bought, what they're already convinced of. And that is, link it to the waterfront and improvements that are being made downtown in terms of a cultural quality of life improvements. You know, a lot of these, it struck me that a lot of the applications we get are for activities that are taking place in the plaza, the big tent on the waterfront, and various areas, the Pall Mall, the alleyway, art for the, for the new sports complex in the West End, etc. And this supports what they've already decided and makes it more viable. Plus, just the general quality of life things that quality of life issues that apply to people trying to get people to move to Sault Ste. Marie, particularly professionals and people like that.
Thanks, Larry. Brenna?
Okay, I was under the understanding that we were going from 104 to 160. At an ask of 160, I anticipate it being denied. And I don't see us having the leverage to ask for that. I understand, like, that would put us at 264 from the 104 that we currently have on a regular basis. Is there a way to table something that makes that incremental over time up to an additional 160 as opposed to 160 every year? Or is there a way to kind of start it at 60 and then move up to 160? Because I don't know if we have the argument for that full amount and getting the vote.
Just to provide some background, and I'll go to Virginia for more clarification, but the 160 number is what's necessary to reach the target that is in the cultural plan of an average of $5 per person per resident per year, to bring us up to the same level as municipalities of similar size and character. And the City Council did endorse that plan. So this isn't coming out of the blue for them. And over the course of the last several years, the last 5 years since the cultural plan was adopted, proportional step increases have been requested, not always approved. But I would also caution against assuming that because a request is large, it means it will be denied and you'll get nothing, as opposed to just a portion of what you're asking for. But I'll defer to Virginia for further clarification.
Yeah, and just to add on to what Sean's saying, that funding is also divided into kind of 3 different pots. So there's additional funding to give to the cultural organizations. There was a recommended increase for heritage. We have the number of heritage properties is growing, and the pot of funds that we have to support heritage property owners has not increased in 15 years at least since I started with the city, and then also additional funding to support public art installations. So it is broken into 3 areas. And in the past, sometimes our requests would go to council and they would fund, they can make a decision to fund 50% of that, as Sean indicated.
I understand that there are based in, but like we're supposed to get 40, like a big percentage of every infrastructure and public art placed into a fund. We're supposed to get a percentage for activating spaces when they build each one of these plazas and infrastructures, and it hasn't happened over time. And I don't know if I have the trust in that argument for our city council. So I know that that's a strong argument. I just think that it would be better to illustrate how far that would go in our own community. Right now, in order to fund like 13, which would be half of what Sudbury funds, we'd only need to increase about 46,000. If we can get more than that, then we can do more impact. However, I don't know if we have an argument for the full. I understand that that's the set rate, but we have been missing out through the tourism department, the social equity fund, and the major celebration funds, and those as well. So I'm not sure if I trust that, although it's policy, that it will be placed back into the Cultural Vitality Committee's hands. So I understand how we go about it, and that's the process. And I would hope that council would oblige, but we've lost in the past.
Thanks, Brenna. I'm just going to bring us back to our focus of the discussion today, which is about the splitting of the ACAP intake 50-50 versus the 75-25 proportion that we've had today. So is there further comment or question on that particular item? Larry?
Yes, just carrying on. I think we can make a strong issue over the quality of life thing. I'm not going to repeat myself, but City Hall has obviously bought the quality of life budget issue because of the improvements they've been making. Now I waited and I've lost my train of thought. Oh yes, the diversity. It's also a way to deal with the increasing diversity of Sault Ste. Marie. We give a lot of grants to different ethnic groups and different things of that nature. That I think will ease any issues caused by the diversification of our population. I hear on the streets every day, oh gee, every drive-through you go through, you see somebody Southeast Asian, and it's not derogatory; it's just being observant. And but I think there's a connection that we should make there.
Thanks, Larry. Again, I'm just going to, if we don't have any comment on the specific topic of splitting or changing the distribution of ACAP fund, I'll ask us to move to a motion if there's a desire for
As a point of reference, so the split would just be very specifically $52,200 for over 2 intakes. Again, it's the same amount of money that we're working with, just evened into intakes.
Great. Is somebody interested in moving that motion? I see Larry, and then a second by Nyla. So discussion on that motion in particular. If anybody's opposed, please do voice your concern, or if you're just not sure. Donna?
I just want to ensure that anybody like people like me who receive funding, is there some type of a perceived conflict to weigh in on this particular question?
Oh, very good question.
I know I'm supposed to figure that out for myself, but just sitting here thinking about that. So I mean, I'm happy to I don't know if we need that from a forum perspective.
I wouldn't say so, if that's okay for me to say. I would say that just there's so many of us that are working with so many different organizations that are impacted. It would be all of us.
I'm not doing anything today, Donna.
I'm comfortable with that. From my own personal side, I just thought I would bring it up. Thanks.
No, it's very thoughtful, though. All right. Any other questions, comments?
Do we need to have a resolution, like an actual be it resolved conversation?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Do you want me to just speak it out?
That would be great. I will record it. Okay. Yes.
Sure. I guess Zoom is helping here too. Be it resolved that the distribution of ACAP funding should be distributed across 2 intakes, with the funds to be divided equally.
And are we I think because this is a changing document that was approved by council, I think we need to recommend to council of the change we made.
Right.
Is that correct?
That makes sense.
Could we add between the 2?
Sure. Friendly amendment.
Okay, and we talked about moved by.
Moved by Larry, seconded by Nyla. So all those in favor, please raise your hand. Oh, that carries. Great. Thank you all very much. And sorry to be nipping that really good, interesting conversation, but we've got to move along here. We've got a full agenda. Next item is review of ACAP evaluation rubric. So I understand the subcommittee's been working on this. Alicia, I don't know if you want to begin the discussion.
Sure. I'll start and I'll let Brenna jump in as well, please. So the quick version being that through the discussion through the subcommittee, there is a need for a revised version of the rubric because that piece of the process isn't necessarily approved by council, we are able to make a recommendation to the larger cultural vitality committee from the subcommittee and pass that ourselves. It would be a matter of determining those factors. Again, recommending to the CVC and then to us publishing those properly on the website prior to the intake process. But in terms of specifics, Brenna, if you'd like to jump in, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, I believe that we were looking at adding a portion for cultural diversity because it seems difficult to mediate these things based on different streams, some major celebrations, some cultural celebrations, and it seems like some organizations may be missing the opportunity to make those claims as well. So if within the rubric, we were able to evaluate and give points to whether it's a self-identifying group that works with the self-identifying group, and then have different levels underneath that would be added into the matrix, and they would innately get those points for working with those underrepresented communities or those equity deserving groups. So instead of segregating them initially upon the application, we would be looking across the board at the diversity level and the cultural diversity level and the representation of each individual program and giving them an internal grade there. So it would innately increase the likelihood of an equity deserving group getting funding, while also creating the opportunity for every single project to have that angle and to look at that angle, because I think we've come across so many projects that have an equity deserving portion to it, but might not fall into that exact stream or might not be that major cultural celebration. So because so many of our programs are inclusive, nonprofit, and they do work with equity seeking groups, we thought that it would be positive to incorporate it into the rubric for each program. And that way we don't have to segregate our cultural diversity programs from the bunch, but kind of evaluate them within the whole. So I guess that was the proposal.
Thanks, Brenna. Any comments, questions? I don't see any, so maybe what I might suggest is just that sounds like there's not opposition, potentially some interest, worthwhile drafting something and bringing it back, I guess. I see some head nods. Awesome.
Excellent. That would be great.
Great. And I don't mean to rush us. If people are pondering, please feel free to pose questions. But if not, we'll move on to the next item, 5.3, establishing a threshold prior to committee review at meetings, which
so I guess I'll just jump in with part of the conversation in the past. We've worked through a different series of events in evaluating these different types of in these applications. And I think initially, it was the intention of the committee, if I'm going back to as far as 2020, to come in with a threshold or to not review past below a certain threshold, and have that number established prior to the meeting, and thus helping to save the discussion time that's required of those applications. As we just discussed in the last, with the last item in particular, again, making sure that different groups have access to the same playing field, more or less, with that, having that piece of inclusion in the rubric will help with that a little bit. But also, anyway, the point is that what we're looking at is essentially looking at establishing a number beforehand. And I don't know if that needs to happen before each meeting, rather each intake session, based on staff review process, or if this is something that if everyone wants to see every application, certainly you'll have access to whatever you'd like to see. But ultimately, if you want to have access to each application that's submitted and have the ability to go ahead and to review and then to have the discussion and to cut the discussion, I guess, so to speak, it just depends how we want to move forward. And in the essence of time and recognizing the such significant contributions of all the volunteers on this board. Does anybody would like to talk about that?
I don't see any hands yet, but I'll jump in and say it would be welcome, I think. You know, conventionally we did it before each meeting just to provide us that flexibility, especially when the process was new, because we didn't know what we were going to get. You know, we started with 60%. That's becoming quite low, because the quality of what we're receiving is increasing, in addition to the volume of what we're receiving increasing. Those are my 2 cents, but I see Donna had her hand up as well.
I'm looking for some clarification. Are you suggesting that a threshold is established so that we agree that any applications that are scored by the committee in the same way that they are now, that do not reach a threshold, whatever history has taught us, would then be not discussed in the funding decision process? So nothing changes compared to the way it is now, other than the fact that if everybody who's participating in the scoring reads their information, goes through and prepares their scores, the scores are tabulated, and anything then the tabulated scores are presented to everyone, but we only discuss any that have exceeded a threshold of whatever we determine is the minimum that an application has to score by the committee, not by the staff, by the committee, in order for it to be considered and discussed by the group for possible funding. Is that what I understood you to say?
I see Brenna's hand. I think likely in direct response.
Yeah, I think the way that I pictured it was, as opposed to cutting from the bottom, we would pick from the top. So we would choose the top 8, as opposed to always being limited to, oh, there's only 2 that didn't meet the threshold, and then we're looking at 15 applications. We would technically just be pulling the top 8 applications, or whichever amount we would choose as the top qualifying to shortlist. So it would be the same process, but it would be the opposite. So instead of setting the threshold at 6, and then anyone below 6 gets cut, and we're still faced with 30 applications, we would just look at the top 10 of which we could handle. And the scoring would still establish who lands at the top the same way it establishes who lands at the bottom. So that's the way that I picture it, but it's the same process, just a little bit more streamlined, so that we don't have as many, a little bit more short listed, if that makes sense.
Ultimately, what I
Brenna.
think this means is, oh, sorry, sorry.
Yes.
What I think this ultimately means is just more lead time for staff. So in terms of when getting those numbers back, and just we're preparing for that week in between, from gathering the scores after the applications have gone to committee for review. What that will mean is just more time in between in ensuring that those numbers are tabulated correctly. In past, because of timelines, I've accepted scores up until the hour before the meeting, but that's not really helpful if we're trying to prepare synopses and other different types of support materials that come along with this. But that's not a big deal. It's just we would need to know that, of course, which we will in some capacity.
Okay, so
sorry.
sorry, Sean, could I just get a follow-up? So to clarify, nothing changes other than a threshold is established in advance of the discussion. Is there a best practice threshold? Many of us have participated in other types of grant adjudication, if you will. Is there best practice out there? Is it 75% or something like that? Or is there no magic number to that?
I think I can respond to part of that question, but I'll defer to Brenna in relation to the other aspects of the question.
I think it depends on funds available. So that's is the outcome of your grant. So the funds available would determine how high of a qualification level it would be. So if you have lower amounts of funds, it might be more difficult to qualify because the awards are less. If you have a lot of opportunities to get grants and a lot of funds, then it'd be easier to qualify. That's just my perspective. But Sean, sorry.
Well, just in terms to your question about like, is there a magic number for thresholds? I can't speak to all arts funding, but my experience with Ontario Arts Council has been that they typically set a threshold at the beginning of their respective meetings, partly because each of their funds is very different and distinct from one another. But so I think we just have, well, what I would take from that is that we have to follow our best judgment in setting that threshold, because I don't know that there's a best practice. At least none that I've seen. That doesn't mean there isn't one. No, Nyla, I wanted to go to you first for a question. But of course, if people still have follow-up questions, we'll continue down the list.
No, that's okay. I was gonna I can't remember now, but just add something on to what Brenna had said, like an additional idea. But if we're discussing that down the line, I'll just I'll wait on that. It's not really pertinent now to where the conversation's gone. So I'll just hold on to that.
Oh, no, you may as well share now because nobody's raised their hand about anything else.
Well, no, and I haven't been part of other committees that necessarily have like that threshold. So I couldn't talk comparatively or how other people do it. It's just I hadn't thought about like taking from the top instead of having the threshold. So when Brenna had said that, I had just wondered too about if it wasn't like I know you were just saying, Brenna, like the top 8, and it's just a number that you were choosing, but it just made me think. I was wondering if it had the potential to be I'm not using the term bell curve correctly, I don't think, but something like that, because some years you have very maybe strong applicants where they're all above that threshold, and 50% is easy to say, but if we found the average of what that whole total intake was, the thing being, of course, I guess, at least last time we've done intake, we were doing them in batches, so we wouldn't know, I guess, what that overall 50% would be. I don't know if it'd help the discussion more at the end once we do have all those numbers tabulated. And I know, at least personally, like I changed a couple numbers after the group discussion from learning more about the application or something I didn't know about that field. So I just was thinking that when we kind of talked about just a number, I was wondering if there's some way to make it maybe so it's moving to reflect what that intake looked like, if it was a percentage or a bell curve thing. But that was just my comment to add on to Brenna's.
Thanks, Nyla. I see Brenna's hand.
Yeah, if I can respond really quickly, I guess in terms of probability and statistics, it would play into how lucky of a chance you get to get it. So depending on how much funding we have, that would then relate to how competitive it is. And depending on how lucky or how likelihood or how strong of an application you would need to get a piece of that pie, that would be your best practice in terms of setting up your threshold at the start. So depending on how competitive you want it to be, how much output you have in terms of funding, whether you can meet the needs of your applicants, and how competitive it is. So when the last term, when we had and we're only able to fund 5, that's a massively competitive opportunity. The threshold went up. It naturally lowered our ability to give them out. So a lot of times it's probably best to look at the funding that we can allot and then create the probability and expand on how many applications we need to take in to make it a best practice and review it properly so that there's proper allotments. But that would change based on how much funding we could allot and how many grants we could approve, I would think.
Thanks, Brenna. I'm just going to put myself on the speakers list here. I wasn't interpreting the initial proposal as, sort of picking a certain number from the top. I do foresee some challenges with that. I mean, at least with the sort of lower threshold, we have the justification of, essentially we're taking the stand that as a committee, we're not funding something that doesn't score above this particular area based on aspects of quality metrics. And so that's, even if we had the funds to fund those projects, we're saying that we wouldn't fund them. Where what's left is really variable depending on how much money we have, what the size of the asks are, and what number of asks we're receiving in a given year, or intake, I should say, because last time we received applications ranging from $40,000 to $2,000, and that for something like I'll summarize it as like taking it from the top. For that to work, I think there's a few intervening pieces that we'd have to adjust before then in relation to maybe a maximum request amount, or well, that's what comes to my mind at first. So those are just some of my questions or comments. So I see Larry, then Donna, and then if anybody has well, of course it's open.
I'm just thinking, it's fine for us to talk about this, but we may have to experience it a couple of times. And maybe we should be starting with talking about every funding every funding session, or at least each of the two intakes. We should be talking about the where the cutoff is to begin with, rather than beginning with the applications. And I don't know how you make a decision about. I've always had a concern about this. I don't know how you deal with it. But do you want to give everybody just a little, but not enough to maybe really help them? Or do you want to give everybody more so it helps them, but then fewer people get anything? I just don't know how you reconcile those two approaches.
Thanks, Larry. Donna, then Brenna.
So this has me thinking that perhaps the idea of 2 intakes is not the best way of fairness and adjudication, if you will. And maybe, and I think Larry might have slightly alluded to this, but maybe, I always say this is a good problem to have. We did not have this problem 5 years ago. We did not have the quality of applications. We did not have people sharing in our tax dollars, creating amazing projects and upping the value of culture and arts in this community. And so, growing pains. But maybe we really need to think a lot and talk more about, forget 2 intakes. We're going to know at one point during the year when a budget is approved, we're going to know, and hopefully, in subsequent years, we know we have a base set of funding that has changed. If things go our way, and once again, I'm really feeling good about seeing those words in the high level of that strategic plan. Maybe we go to 1 intake. It happens in, I'm going to say, January or February. It captures anything anybody wants to do in a calendar year. And it would appear to me to be much more fair. Certainly 50-50 is more fair than 75-25. However, this is completely fair. Every single application has the same potential and access to the entire amount of funding that we have available to share. And, you still aren't going to fund, poor applications or applications that aren't, meeting the needs of the community or meeting the needs of the fund, or, whatever it would be. But we get away from this. Depends on when your chances are better if I don't think a poor application should be funded. I would choose to hold on to the money than fund something just because there were fewer applications in one versus the other. That would be those are my comments.
I see Brenna, then Larry, but also just a time check. We're at 12:45. I know many of us have engagements at 1 o'clock, so if we can squeeze it up.
Yeah, no, I apologize, but our
the role of the arts and culture applications is for individuals and small nonprofits. The Tourism Development Fund is our $20,000, $40,000, $50,000 funder. We do not have the means to give those out. And in terms of individuals and their creative projects, they're not going to happen once a year. So we are the small funder. We are the 5,000, the 2,000, the 6,000. We cannot take on the responsibility of $40,000 major celebrations. That is the responsibility of the Tourism Development Fund. If they are not taking on, if we keep receiving applications for major nonprofits or community activities in town, we can't fund them. They need to go to the Tourism Development Fund. They need to get economic support. They need to get the business. They need to get the mentoring. They need to get the incubators. They need to be able to advance. So what we've been able to do with the ACAP is take people's ideas and projects and build them to a point where they'll be able to apply for becoming nonprofits or not-for-profit organizations. And then at that point, they can go on to other sources of funding with the city. But right now, we don't have the means to provide $40,000 to a festival. We don't have the means to do that with $104,000 a year. Even at $264,000 a year, we won't have the means to give the entire seed or operating funding to an entire museum or institution within Sault Ste. Marie. So in our role, it's to be able to build them to the point where they get to the Tourism Development Fund. And if the Tourism Development Fund isn't funding these programs like the Musical Comedy Guild and the Algoma Conservatory of Music and Fringe Festival and Algoma Festival of whatever, then we have an issue because it's going to be put on us and we're going to have really great applications come that we can't deny, but we will not have the ability to fund. And we'll end up setting it up in a way where we miss individuals, we miss those small projects, and then everyone gets placed in a position where they have to be a nonprofit or a greater organization. So in terms of our purpose, it's more important to make sure that we are able to get the individuals in on a regular basis, the startups, the seed funding, the creative people, and get them to a place where then they can really manifest those into real businesses that take in $40,000 a year. However, I'm not sure, and this might just be my opinion, but I don't believe that our $104,000 fund is meant to fund $40,000 operating grants or major things like that. And I personally would put those on other parts of the city. But that's just my opinion. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Thanks, Brenna. I'm going to go to Larry, and then I'm going to end discussion on this item, and we'll move to either a motion if somebody wants to move one, and otherwise we'll move to the next item on the agenda. Larry?
Yeah, I think I agree with Donna. I think her approach would be fairer, but just one caveat. I don't know if it can be done, but I would encourage people to be applying much earlier, so that we don't have to read in the last 10 days until our eyeballs are rolling on the floor. I don't know if that's possible, but I think it would be a fairer thing. And I agree with Brenna to an extent too. Maybe we should just not fund operating grants. Maybe we should trim what we can fund.
There are city funds for operating.
I think there's some caveats there, but I'm not sure we're making much progress on the actual item on the agenda. So there's two things that are happening. One is sort of a reconsideration of the resolution that was actually already passed of splitting the fund 50-50 for this intake. If we want to reconsider that, we will need a resolution to do so, and change that to a single intake if that's the desire of the committee. The other is the commentary on establishing a threshold prior to committee review at meetings. And I think there's been a lot of really interesting discussion. My hunch is that there isn't consensus or a majority consensus on precisely how that would work. So maybe that's an item to more take back to the subcommittee for further discussion. But I would entertain a motion on either one of those items. So I have Brenna first.
I would invite everyone to review the subcommittee meeting where is a document and different avenues and streams and different suggestions for the way thresholds can be made. So I don't think it's an opportunity now to go over all the different ideas on thresholds that the subcommittee kind of went over, but there is a meeting on YouTube that you can view where the subcommittee kind of went through these different options and reviewed them, and they might provide a little bit more insight for the decision making at the meetings.
If there's a document, could it be emailed to the members of the committee?
Yes, and I would also add that actually presenting a resolution ahead of time provides more clarity during meetings for having those on the agenda will help too.
Just because we are getting late and I don't want to waste any time with words here, but yeah, I definitely think it's a great idea. If that's okay with everybody, I can circulate the link to the meeting as well as the document that was discussed at the meeting. I think that what you will see is that there was conversation about a single intake and about making incremental change as opposed to making wide sweeping change at this time, because again, about being able to deploy that properly without making sure that people are not losing access to funds at this time of year by going to a single intake when they're expecting it to be October and then funds to be dispersed by the end of January. So there was significant conversation there as well. But this is all really good. I'm really glad that we're having this discussion. And ultimately, we'll start with the circulation of materials.
Thanks very much, Donna.
This is very, very important, what we're talking about now. And it's very, very important. And I would suggest and place this out there just for people to think about or even just act on. Is there any way that we could find a time, maybe we have to have a special meeting, to get ourselves in one room and talk in person about these things? They're crucial to us being more successful and growth and future and thinking and having more money, and give ourselves the time to take something as significant as this and really hash it out, because everybody has something to say about this. Everybody is thinking, we're thinking, how do we make this the best for the community? And we are obviously under a time crunch, but I think that we can do much better work if we give ourselves time to handle one thing that's as crucial as this and make a really good decision that's in the best interests of arts and culture and vitality in the city.
Thanks, Donna. I think that's a great idea. I'm not seeing any further comment or question, so I take it that our 50-50 resolution will stand for today. And it's something to reconsider potentially, or not necessarily reconsider for this year, but to include in that bigger discussion. I suppose, I mean, this also relates to some of the things that I think we've been trying to see if they might fit into the context of a forum. But I think that part of this is also just not that it's an internal conversation. I mean, all of our meetings are public, but that for those of us that have the experience of running through the process, it's really important for us to flesh out all of those ways that it has played out, things to consider for the future, and so on. So, Brenna, comments?
Are we able to open up like the next subcommittee meeting to more of like a forum opportunity and try and like because yeah, if we go back with the then we're just getting answers, and it'd be better if we could all do that together. So if there's an opportunity for the next subcommittee meeting to be something where we create that.
Virginia, sorry, I was going to support that. Virginia, I just want to check in with you. Because it's a subcommittee meeting, it was open to all committee members. Is that correct?
Yeah. So, I mean, having all the committee there, it's already televised YouTubed and streamed. So it's an open committee meeting. So any of the members that want to participate in the discussion are welcome to join in.
Thanks,
great.
Virginia.
I'll work together. I'll work to get out an invitation for that for sooner than later. And we'll see how we can move forward with this as well.
And I wonder, this might be a little out there, but I'm wondering if we can send a very quick and dirty survey to previous applicants with 2 questions. Can be anonymous, but one of them being what worked well with the process, what didn't. And I think that's really simple, but can give us a lot of insight into applicants' understanding of the process as well. I don't know.
Absolutely.
That's doable? Okay.
We can actually do that. Yeah, that's not a problem. I was going to say that if those are the only 2 questions that should be involved, perhaps it's okay. I might send an email to the group. Of course, it won't be a group email, but you'll respond directly to me. And I'll see if there are any further questions that should also be, just to give everyone a minute or 2 to think about it and see if there's something else that should be further part of that conversation. Because I think we'll get a lot of responses and we'll get a lot of variation in those responses as well, based on the year, the intake, the process that we followed, the threshold that we established at that time. It's all been quite variable. And so anyway, that sounds great.
Awesome. Wonderful. Okay,
I
so
look forward to working through it with everybody's feedback so that it can be worked through in like a positive way and we can include everybody at the same time.
Awesome. Okay, we've got to move on to subcommittee and task force updates. We've got the Pall Mall Alley for 2025.
That's okay. It's just a quick one. And with that in mind, Pall Mall Alley will be opening up the applications, sorry, for the request for applications for the Pall Mall Alley project for 2025, probably early next week. And so that'll close by the end of the month. So in early October, I believe I have Larry and Yasmina on that subcommittee, the task force. And so within working with them, we will review those and get together and discuss the process with those, and hopefully have that information back to applicants by early November. That's the process there with that one. Sorry, I don't want to take off. It's all my stuff next.
Yeah, Northern Community Center, call for Indigenous artists for public art.
Again, also looking at early next week to have that released. Again, I believe that I think it's Lee who's on that task force, and is it Brenna? I'm having a moment here. Yes. And so I'll double check my notes, of course, to make sure that people have the appropriate information, but we're looking out for that information. It'll be promoted through social media. The call to artists will go to, again, like so to Sue Today, and we'll place it in a bunch of other places as well and shop it around a bit. And that should be really exciting. That's it for now.
Culture Days.
Culture Days is coming up. In short, I'd like to talk about the Vivid Art Festival. It replaces the Summer Moon Festival, which has traditionally happened in June. The Vivid Art Fest it's a celebration of arts and culture in Sault Ste. Marie and the region. We have a full roster planned. Actually, I was going to say I should have at vividartfest.ca if you'd like to go there, or on Facebook or Instagram. Ultimately, we have 2 nights of musical performances. The first night, I'm having a moment here where I was going to say we have Brendan Hodgson. I was going to say that we have the Golden Scoundrels and another planned. I'm so sorry. I've been doing like the lineup for weeks in my brain. Ultimately, the second evening, we have local artists, Skeletune, Bold Noise, Planet Rock, and then some people who are traveling in, Mickey O'Brien as the headliner, and some other hip hop artists as well. OZ, I think it is, and Johnny Business. In a little bit out of order, we'll have free walking tours available, mostly starting to and from the plaza. We have artist workshops happening, hopefully within the school board. We're still working on the details of those, of course, because the school year has really just started. But we're also providing free artist workshops hosted and presented by Sky Smith. In dancing, storytelling through dance. We have Sarah Skagen, who will be talking about her production of She and the process that she went through to create the work, and a panel with Tagona Press with Brian Davies and others from Tagona Press talking about publishing. In addition to that, we also have a morning of cultural performances and free yoga at the plaza lined up essentially from 9 until 2 p.m. A Q&A with the artists, and we also have large-scale public art. And so we have murals coming to the Soo as well. And in addition to that, we've partnered with the Two Spirited Organizing Committee to help sponsor the Country Hoedown that's happening at Main Street on the 21st. Tickets are $15 in advance at Amore. And this information is out there as well. And that's pretty much it for now. But there's a lot. And a full film festival on Sunday afternoon through Tenaris. Again, signups are required, but it's all free.
Man, 3 agenda items in 4 minutes. That must be a record. Thanks, Alicia. Comments or questions?
For any of it.
Anyway, yeah. Larry. Oh, you're on mute. You're muted, Larry.
I put a chat in
Oh,
for
yes.
Virginia. I'm wondering if she might go to whoever wrote that report or the source of the $160,000 in increased funding for the Cultural Vitality Committee to see what it meant and what what are they talking about? What was the intention?
The intention of getting the additional funding?
Yeah, the
Or-
comments in that report were very vague, were very, very, very general. I just was wondering if you can go and talk to somebody, power that be, saying, what's in mind? What
Well, I think
this is
I
a signal, but what do you intend?
I think I can clarify a little bit. There's actually two different pieces here. One is the corporate strategic plan, which Donna was referencing, which is the sort of vaguer language, which is typical for those types of strategic plans. And then the other is the $160,000 figure, which is based on a different report, which is the community cultural plan. So that number is based on the recommendation to bring Sault Ste. Marie up to the same level as comparable sized communities that provide an average of $5 per capita in funding for arts, culture, and heritage.
So we know the answer, and I didn't realize it was two reports.
That's okay. That's okay. But is there any clarification you wanted on the strategic plan?
No, if you're satisfied, you're sure that it's just referring to bringing us up to what was already, projected or planned. That's fine. You've had.
Thanks, Larry. Brenna?
It may be nice for us to add the context of like how important that is and what that can do for us when they're making those deliberations. So we can add some kind of, value as to this is what that 160, it won't just bring us up to legislation, but here's how it'll affect our economy, our quality of life and everything like that. That might just be our angle from the CVC to try and get them to accommodate that number.
Thanks, Brenna. And just for context, that is part of often what the rationales are that go into staff submissions to budget as well. But
I think that you've probably all heard me say these numbers before, but I know that what was included in part of this report was the numbers from our intake in this past year in particular. Again, we're looking at $380,000 in total requests with 46 unique applications. We only had 2 that were really repeats from previous intakes. So those numbers were included to help justify that number in that we have like requests that far exceed the funds that are available as well.
Thanks, Alicia. All right, let's move on to new business. Any new business? Seeing none. Correspondence. Any correspondence? Seeing none. Next meeting.
I think we're probably looking at sooner than later, probably, but reasonably speaking, I know that we're trying to move things quickly, but I don't know. I was going to say something, but I don't know. But I think that we're probably looking at an early October. If we're looking to make other changes to ACAP, we're looking at early October as well. So in addition to the subcommittee meeting that we mentioned earlier.
Thank you very much. So we look forward to future email correspondence for scheduling that. And next, do I have a mover to adjourn? Moved. Oh, competition. Larry, then Donna. And all those in favor, please raise your hands. And the meeting is adjourned at 1:03. Ooh, 59 minutes. Record time.
Have a great day, everybody.